Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFP podcast. This is Jorge Martin and Familia. We are on YouTube. Hey, we are getting closer and closer and closer to getting our subscriber mark. So please give us a like and subscribe. Por favor. We've been during our NFL Insider Series. Oh, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. During our NFL Insider Series, I've been seeing those come up. I've been seeing the views. I'm watching you guys. Please keep sending questions, comments. Love it, love it, love it. And Familia, as we've been talking about, hey, we are a proud member of the Fantasy Points Media Group. When you go to fantasypoints.com, put in that promo code Familia22, get yourself 10% off. You get some of the greats in the fantasy, great minds in fantasy. John Hansen, who lives in kind of close to our guest today, in the same region. We got Graham Barfield. We got, oh my goodness, we've got some of the best minds. Tom Brawley, Scott Barrett, Joe Dolan, Wes Huber, some of the great minds. Let me tell you something. Please make sure to, when you go to that fantasypoints.com, give us get Familia 22, or if you want to put it in Spanish, Familia 22. Really appreciate it. Familia, we got to, when Frank Sinatra said that if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, this man is a testament to it. 40 years covering the New York Football Giants, the Big Blue. Paul Dottino, I mean, from WFAN, one of the absolute, when you think of, I'm telling you, I'm not just blowing smoke right now. When I think of the iconic names for networks, I don't know if I could. I don't know if there's a number two that's close. WFAN, and this guy has been covering the Giants. He's got the inside. He's been credentialed all those times since he was in college. And speaking of college, Familia, this is a Fordham grad. Okay, now you guys know my love and reverence for El Señor Vin Scully, Vincenzo. I've thanked him many times for being my soundtrack to my summer. This is a fellow alum. Paul, bienvenido. Thank you for joining us. Muchas gracias.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. Appreciate it so much. And the smoke is very thick right here. I don't know if you can still see me after all the smoke you put into my room, but it is very good to be with you. And Vin, of course, oh my, you talk about the Pope of sportscasting. It doesn't get any higher than that.
It really doesn't. And one of the things that when people ask me, and I obviously got to know him a little bit in my 8 years with the organization, people ask me what he's like, and they said, and I've often said, when you meet your heroes, you hope that they don't disappoint you. This man had impossible height to reach as far as expectations, and he actually surpassed that. One of the greatest in people. Yeah. And you're a fellow alum. Any chance I get to talk about Fordham, any chance I get to talk about Vin, and he also likes to remind former President George Bush, number one, that they played baseball against each other, and no matter what he'd done, that they were always that the president had always gone 0 for 3 the day they played against each other. So
not only that, I'm sure that Vin could even tell you exactly where the ball landed on each one of those outs. He's probably got the original scorebook that he was keeping in the dugout while they were playing the game.
I'm sure he does. And he's probably the only guy who's gotten an autograph by the two of them. And honestly, I'd probably pay more for Vin's autograph than much as I'd love to have a president's autograph. But, Paul, this is, as we would say in Spanish, un gran placer. And to get the inside on the Giants, this is a very important organization in football, in football history, but also, this past year gone through a change. Brian Daboll coming over from the Giants, and also the offensive coordinator coming over.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sorry, from the Bills, and coming over from and our offensive coordinator coming over from the Kansas City Chiefs. I know that this was an offense that was tough to watch at some points last year. What can we see as far as a difference in scheme in the Daboll regime?
You will not recognize this Giants offense. For those folks who are going to watch this on the internet from the Northeast and are familiar with the NFC East and what the Giants usually ran against teams like the Cowboys and the Eagles and the Washington Commanders, you're not going to recognize this team. It is obvious that these guys are going to do a lot more passing game, some deep passing, no question, some medium passing, no question, but there's going to be a lot of short passing game involved. There's going to be a ton of new formations and pre-snap motions and quarterbacks rolling out and throwing on the move and moving pockets and the kinds of things, that video people want to do with the joystick when they're playing Madden. Okay. This is some of the stuff they're going to spice in, kind of like oregano on the pizza. They're going to put a lot of this oregano on the Giants offense because the Giants, outside of, and I think it's fair to say, outside of when Jeff Hostetler had to come in for Phil Simms after Simms got injured during the 1990 season. And Hostetler, as you remember, was a mobile quarterback. He could play the straight drop back stuff, and he had a terrific arm. But he also had a certain amount of mobility to him. And in some ways, he was a little ahead of his time. Now, the Giants did not overemphasize that mobility with Hostetler, but they did sprinkle stuff in with it. Well, as you may remember, the following year, the Giants decided that, they were, as time went on, a couple of years later, they decided to stick with Simms. And Hostetler wound up having many more years of an NFL career with the Raiders and Washington and look, had a really strong NFL career. But for outside of that short period of time, in the 40 years that I've covered the New York Giants, I don't think I have ever seen the variety of stuff that they're going to do on offense this season. And the only reason I can even say that is because I've been to the spring practices. I've been to the minicamp. I've seen the stuff that they're teasing us with. And I'm telling you, folks, you're not going to recognize this offense.
And, there obviously a lot of people coming in and saying, Brian Daboll, he did this for Josh Allen, turned him into a superstar, the Patrick Mahomes there's obviously big expectations, and New York comes with big expectations. And when it comes to Daniel Jones, injuries have played a part, inconsistencies, some turnovers, but one of the things that I learned recently was in Next Gen Stats, he was one of the best deep ball passers in the NFL. You mentioned kind of like the short, all sorts of routes. How does he shape up to maybe kind of growing into this offense? And really what's a make or break year for him where he doesn't have a contract for next year. And and this regime did not draft him. So how does he shape up this year?
There are a lot of components to the question you just asked, so I'll try to make it real quick in bullet points. First thing is they've revamped the offensive line, which, as you know, if you don't have an offensive line, you can put Johnny Unitas back there. It's not going to make any difference, okay? So the truth of the matter is they believe that with a minimum of 3/5, and depending upon how you want to count Shane Lemieux, if you think he's going to win the left guard job, it's at least 3/5 of this offensive line has been turned over. Two of those pieces, Glowinski at right guard coming over from the Colts, who was a big free agent acquisition, and Feliciano, who's going to be a center, coming over from the Bills with Daboll. Okay? Those guys, they really believe that they've got the grit, the toughness, and the veteran leadership to make sure that this transition goes quickly so that the offensive line will at the very least be functional right out of the gate. So that's A. Point B, Saquon Barkley. Obviously, besides an offensive line, a quarterback's best friend is a running game to have some type of balance. Well, Barkley has been working like gangbusters. Not that he didn't work out before, but the intensity and focus that I've seen from him during this offseason, he is hurt pride-wise, emotionally devastated by the injuries that have sidetracked what I think a lot of people thought could be a Hall of Fame career. He is so determined this year to have a season like he did when he was a rookie and was the NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year and had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. He's going to be used, by the way, a lot in the passing game this year. Remember, he caught 91 balls as a rookie. Wouldn't shock me if he caught about 75 or so this year, okay, based on what I think they're going to do with him. The thing about the 91 back in those days is that the Giants' offensive line was so poor that it was usually a quick dump off to him just because he was the safety valve and they had to get the ball out of the quarterback's hands. So I don't think he'll catch 91 passes again. But I think in the designed offense, he could very easily catch 75. And he's going to be, and by the way, I think he's going to run deeper routes. He'll catch more of these passes downfield instead of only 2 or 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, which means his total yardage and his yardage per catch is going to increase dramatically from when he was a rookie. I think point 3, or C, if you will, has to do with the receiving core / tight end. The Giants, let's not kid ourselves, very disappointed that Darius Slayton played hurt last year, again, for the second straight season, and did not look anything like he did as a rookie several years ago where he was very promising. They need a bounce back year from him. Kenny Golladay battled injuries, and I think psychologically he was terribly devastated by the Giants' poor season last year. And then when Jones got hurt and Mike Glennon played the last almost 2 months of the season, the offense just was mired in quicksand. And Golladay was basically a moot point. I think you need to throw that season out and think of the Golladay that caught over 1,000 yards of passes when he was a Pro Bowl pick for the Detroit Lions a few years ago, and the Giants gave him big money before last season. So you need a healthy Slayton. You need a healthy Golladay, and God knows injuries are potluck. Sterling Shepard, ripped his Achilles at the end of the season last year. I don't think he'll be back until at least a month or 2 into this season. Now, that's a guess. The Giants haven't told anybody what his schedule is, and I know he's been working out on the side away from the team, and he's even doing some sprinting. So he's doing well, but is it realistic to think he's going to be there week 1? I just don't know about that. So it's really going to be incumbent on Golladay and Slayton and, little asterisk here, second-round pick Wan'Dale Robinson coming out of Kentucky, where he caught over 100 passes last year and was 3rd in the nation in receptions. This is a guy, much like Kadarius Toney, and I save him for last, and there'll be a reason for that in a minute. But Robinson was drafted in the 2nd round specifically for the opportunity to use him as a gadget receiver. Now, what is a gadget receiver? A gadget receiver is a guy who's going to do all kinds of funky things in the formation. He'll line up anywhere. He'll run any kinds of routes. He'll do trick plays. He'll do regular plays. He'll be a part of running games because his first 2 years at Nebraska before he transferred to Kentucky, he was a running back. So they will use him in a bunch of different ways, not in conventional positions. So he's going to be a very interesting prospect. And then, of course, there's Kadarius Toney. Toney, who I truly believe has the most elusiveness of any receiver on the Giants roster. In fact, more elusiveness than any player on the Giants roster. We know what happened last year. He was hurt, missed a whole bunch of games, but when he was in there, if they could get the ball to him, wow. The problem with people who say to me, man, I got to get Kadarius Toney, in my draft. I say, hold on a second. If you got Barkley and you got Golladay and you got Slayton and you drafted Robinson with the 2nd overall pick, how many passes does that leave for Kadarius Toney? So I think from a fantasy perspective, and I didn't even mention the tight end situation, which is wide open, and Daniel Bellinger, who they took out of San Diego State on the 3rd day of the draft, looks like in the spring he's got terrific hands and could be a big part of the passing game. But how many passes are they going to throw to the tight end? With all of this talent at receiver, if it can stay on the field. So the thing about Toney, yeah, I think there's going to be big plays out of him. I think he's going to have terrific yards per catch. He may catch a bunch of touchdowns. But in terms of numbers of catches, I think Barkley's the guy who's going to get a bunch of them. And Golladay might very well, as he tries to rebound to another 1,000-yard season. But all these other guys, part of the beauty of what Daboll and Kafka want to do is to confuse defenses. Well, you tell me, if they're going to confuse defenses, does that mean they're going to pump feed, certain guys? Outside of Barkley and Golladay, I think they're going to spread the ball around by giving as many different funky looks as they possibly can. And I think a lot of these guys are not going to necessarily play their standard positions on every play. They're going to give you so many different looks. And as a result, I don't know that anybody else on that offense, aside from, again, maybe Barkley and maybe Golladay, is going to put up individual numbers that are going to make your fantasy folks very happy. I do think if they all stay on the field, this Giants offense should be able to average, I don't know, almost a touchdown more a game, certainly in the 23-point range, instead of what they averaged last year, 17?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen this year, and I think it'll help them win a lot more games. But your fantasy folks may not necessarily be thrilled. And in retrospect, looking at everything I just said, that should also help Daniel Jones's numbers. I do think his passing yardage and his completion percentage is going to be really good. I do think his touchdown percentage will be really low. I mean, his interception percentage, his touchdown percentage couldn't have been more lower than it was last year. I do think that'll go up. So I do think that Jones actually could make some fantasy people happy because they will be more pass-oriented. I hope that answers the question.
You actually just answered about 4 questions. I tell you, familia, this is why I love going to a pro, because I mean, you anticipated everything I was going to ask. Really, I mean, the only follow-ups I had to that, because you gave such a comprehensive and just nailed the breakdown of the entire offense. The only 2 follow-ups that I have is, Daniel Jones has been a running threat in the past, and and Josh Allen being one of the league leaders in running the ball. That my first one is going to be about him. Is he going to continue to be a threat in the running game?
I don't think there's any doubt they will want to keep that component in his game. The question becomes, how much do they do it? See, I'm an old school guy. I'm a drop back passer kind of guy. I'm not a big fan of designing 7 and 8, runs a game for my quarterback. To me, Lamar Jackson leading the team in rushing and running for 1,000 yards down in Baltimore is an absolute no-no. I would be allergic to a quarterback who does that kind of stuff and a game plan that does that kind of stuff. Look what happened to RG3. Okay? Yeah. I mean, really, do we have to go any further? So I do think that they will use Jones's legs strategically in key spots to keep people honest, to make sure that they have to respect those legs, and to give them some sense of threat and surprise ability, if you will, that he could take off. But I don't think they will rely heavily on his legs. I think they'd rather rely more on the threat of his legs than him taking off with the ball. I've always said, if my quarterback had more than 4 design runs in a game, you better go check me into the doctor's office because there's something wrong. And I think the Giants will go at it the same way.
I love it. And you actually reinforced something that I've been doing when you were talking about Saquon Barkley, how he's going to be a threat in the passing game. And just going back, how much does this offense fit his running style that much more?
Well, it's not so much his running style. It's more about his confidence and his trust in his linemen. You see, I'm of the opinion, I've been doing this a long, long time, and I know that the critics of Barkley will say he dances too much. He's always looking for the big play. He's got to lower his shoulder and hit the hole more frequently. Listen, I know that's true with a lot of backs. They are more passive. They are jitterbugs. I've seen many guys over my tenure who have been that way. I've also seen running backs who got that way because they didn't have confidence in their offensive line, or they didn't trust their offensive line. Look, if a play is designed to go into the B gap for a 4-yard run on what is a 2nd down and 2, right? And the running back doesn't have confidence when he takes that handoff in the backfield that the block is going to be made the way it was drawn up. What is he going to do? He's going to hesitate. He's going to dance. He's going to try to, that hole's going to close. It's not going to be there. I got to look for another one. Maybe I can cut it to the outside and make a bigger play out of it because I don't want to lose yardage. And that has a terribly negative impact on the running back psyche. And when you as a running back are not instinctively hitting the hole and following the play the way it was meant to be run, you have the kinds of problems that Barkley is being criticized for. I truly believe that it is imperative. It's not about Barkley's style. What I believe it is about his confidence and his trust in those offensive linemen, which right now, this is the best offensive line the Giants potentially have put together, okay, since their second Super Bowl win against the Patriots. I'm not counting the 2 Parcells Super Bowls are too long ago. I'm talking about the 2 Coughlin Super Bowls and when they beat the Patriots. This is the best potential starting 5 linemen they've had since at least that second Super Bowl and maybe even going back to 2007. That's how good this line could be. How quickly will they gel, and will they be able to mesh with Barkley, earn his trust, earn his confidence so that he can be Saquon Barkley? That's the key. It's not about the style. It's about the confidence and the understanding that the block is going to be made the way it was diagrammed, so now I can run the play like it was supposed to be. You do that, and Barkley's going to be the same guy who they drafted out of Penn State, who deserved the gold jacket when they picked him as high as they did.
Yeah, everything is there, and he's, people talk about injury prone. There have been people who've been whispering in the fantasy community talking about him as injury prone. I'm like, no, the guy twisted his ankle. You can't say a guy got, when he hurt his ankle that it's injury prone. It's an accident that happens when you play the most contact heavy position.
Well, if you remember when that angle got turned, it could have been a whole lot worse.
Oh, that's right.
It could have been a whole lot worse. It turned out to be pretty nasty, but, it could have been worse. And when his knee got totally shredded and ripped up in Chicago a couple of years ago, that was career threatening. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
So I know he's been through a lot, but physically, I'm telling you right now, this guy, he's like a bull with smoke coming out of his nostrils. We'll see how it goes.
And I always recommend the running back in that second year coming off of the ACL surgery.
Player, they always tell you in the NFL, it's always the second year out of the ACL surgery where he'll be able to max out whatever he's got left.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, and I was going to ask you about the offensive line, but you already nailed it. This being one of the best groups. So I want to jump to the other side of the ball. And I always ask about how the team shapes up against the run and against the pass, just to see kind of like when teams are going up against the Giants, whether I want to be recommending or not recommending players against them.
Well, Blake Martinez, their stellar co-captain and leader on defense, last year he ripped up his knee.
Yeah. Geez.
Look, one thing I can tell you about the Meadowlands, there's a nasty injury bug around here. And someone's got to get a can of Raid and get that sucker out of here if the Giants are going to be any good. Because, my goodness, look, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. If you look at the facts and the stats in terms of injury and manpower games lost to injury in the league, the Giants over the last 10 years are tops on that list in the NFL. It's not just the last 10 years. I believe it's the last 3 years also. And last year they were either 1 or 2. That's how bad it's been. When injuries are your toughest opponent, there's not a lot you can do to beat them. So, like I say, somebody better get some big cans of Raid down at the Meadowlands to get that injury bug out of here. Regarding Blake Martinez, though, this is a guy who, for 3 straight years, averaged 150 tackles a year. I mean, should have gone to the Pro Bowl, not last year, but the year before in his first healthy season with the Giants. I still don't understand why he didn't get the nod. I guess the Giants' record, had a lot to do with that. Reputation-wise, the Giants were not very good. But he's as solid a tackling machine as any interior linebacker in the league. They missed him horribly last year. In addition to that, Dalvin Tomlinson left via free agency. And Danny Shelton and Austin Johnson were the guys who had to replace him. Shelton was a non-factor. He just did not play well at all. Johnson was a bit more of a penetrator and a pass rusher than he was a clogger and a run stopper. So now what do the Giants do? Well, they got Blake Martinez back. That in itself will change things immensely on their defensive front. But what do you do on the interior of the line? Now, that's very interesting because you now opened up a whole can of worms for me. I don't want to take another 3 hours of your time, but Wink Martindale, the former Ravens defensive coordinator, is now in charge of the Giants defense. He is going to do things, and again, it's hysterical how people are not going to recognize this team. Not only will they not recognize anything this offense does, they will not recognize this defense. If you've watched Ravens defensive tape over the course of the last 3 years, you know it is a high-pressure defense. They'll be one of the top 3 teams probably in blitz percentage. They will be lining guys up all over the field. Don't call guys defensive tackles, defensive ends, linebackers, safeties, corners. He is going to put guys, from what we could see during spring, forget about those positions and those tags. There's going to be 12 guys on the field, okay, or 11 guys on the field.
It's going to feel like it.
He might even put 15 on the field. Who knows? He's going to put his 11 guys on the field. And you will have no idea in many instances what position they're actually playing. For example, there was a spring practice. He had one of his safeties lined up on the defensive line, standing up in the A-gap, coming on a blitz. How often do you see that?
Jeez.
You just don't. Now, a linebacker, sure. Linebackers often creep up. Safeties will sneak up some, but right up on the line? That doesn't happen a lot in this league. He's already playing Rubik's Cube with all of his defensive players. So my answer to you is, I don't know if they'll be better against the run or better against the pass. I don't know because there's nothing conventional about his defense, or at least what he's planning to do with this defense. There'll be very few guys who will play to their traditional positions. Blake Martinez will be one of them. That I can assure you. But with the pass rush capabilities of a Kayvon Thibodeau,
yes,
Azeez Ojulari, Leonard Williams, and then the ability of some of the young linebackers who have not had a chance to do anything in their first couple of years here for various reasons. Guys like, I don't know, Cam Brown, possibly Ellison Smith, who's very intriguing to me because of his skill set. Carter Coughlin. Then there's the rookie linebackers they drafted. Nobody really knows who's going to be on the field on what down or in what package, because Wink is going to be so multiple. And then there's always the chance that he's going to send DBs. So I can't answer your question other than to say this is going to be a very dynamic defense. They'll be fun to watch. They will certainly give up some big plays. You're going to hit them when they take those kinds of risks and chances. You will burn them on a number of occasions. But they're also going to make a ton of big plays. At least I think so. As long as they're healthy enough to keep the young talent on the field. It remains to be seen.
Oh, mi amigo, this has been awesome. This has been awesome, and I just love the East Coast feel, the intensity. I can feel it. I feel like football's coming in when I listen to your voice. So thank you. I want to ask, as I mentioned, just I'm a big Lawrence Taylor fan.
Yes.
Back in the day, I feel like he changed the game. I was recently on someone's podcast who asked me greatest defensive player all time and greatest now. And when I went all time, I went LT because just everything, how much he did. He was also one of the most colorful characters. Do you have a favorite story or something you could share? That's considering this is a familia show, so for a familia
yes, many non-familia stories concerning LT, but I'll give you one that just kind of tells you about what he meant as a player to his teammates. And for everything that Lawrence Taylor was off the field, very erratic individual for sure. I mean, it's well documented. But his last season with the Giants, it was 1993. Okay, Dan Reeves was in his first year with the club. The Giants wound up going to the playoffs, and they wound up getting beaten out in San Francisco in what was the last game of the careers of Lawrence Taylor and Phil Simms, as you probably recall.
Yep.
Okay. Well, going into the final game of that regular season, Lawrence Taylor, and we all knew he was probably not going to play another year. He had pretty much kind of hinted all along that this was going to be it, because he had come back, remember, from a torn Achilles that he had injured midway through the 92 season. And he had come back in 93 because he wanted to play for Dan Reeves, who had just been named the new head coach. And he respected Dan. And he thought that, he didn't want to go out on a cart in the middle of Giants Stadium. He wanted to go out as a player. So he came back and he's playing in 93. And the second half of that season, he's got a really bad hamstring. And he's laboring. And, you'd have to check the records, but I think he went like 6 straight games without a sack, coming into the final month of the season. He wasn't himself. He was hurting badly, but he was still Lawrence Taylor. And he was still going out there on the field trying to give everything he had. Well, going into the final week of the season, they're going to play the Dallas Cowboys. And, they're going into, obviously, a situation where it's a division rival. All right. It's a huge game. They would love to get a win, going into the playoffs and maybe even avoid the wild card game. So I, at that time, was the radio pregame host on the Giants radio network here in New York. And I decided that, for my pregame guest this week, for this final regular season game, I'm gonna ask Lawrence. I'm gonna ask LT if he'll do it. And he was very moody, so you never knew if he was going to be agreeable or not. Well, anyway, especially considering he had this really, really bad hamstring, and it was incredibly cold in New York that week. Horribly cold. And you don't need me to tell you that's not good for hamstrings. And Lawrence, getting him out to even do any practice at this point was really asking a lot because he just didn't have much in his legs. So I figured, you know what? Let me give it a shot. So I just went up to PR and I said, look, I'd like to talk to Lawrence, for the pregame show this week, the tape during the week. And they said, well, if you want to ask him, you go right ahead.
I love.
Yeah,
hands off.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it. It's like leaving out a running back on trying to pick up the blitz, right? So I had a good relationship with him. So, the hammy was bad, and there was actually some doubt as to whether or not he would play. So here we go, and we're in the middle of the week, and it's during lunchtime, and I see Lawrence is over by his locker, and people are afraid to go up to him. They don't want to talk to him. He's really angry. You can see he's just finishing up his food. And I'm like, if I don't do it now, this is not going to happen. So I go up to him. So Lawrence, he looks at me, and he's got that look in his eye that every quarterback fears, right? And I said, look, I know that you probably don't want to do it, but this could be your last regular season game. I'd love to do 5 minutes with you for the pregame show. If you possibly could do it for me after practice. He goes, okay, I'll be there. And I felt really good because here's Lawrence saying, he's going to do it. So I went back to the PR guy and I said, he said he's going to do it. He goes, all right, well, he says it, set up your stuff, but, we're not going to be able to track him down for you. You're going to have to just go with his word. I said, no, if he said he's going to do it, he's going to do it. And that's the thing about Lawrence Taylor. Lawrence Taylor, as erratic as he was, at least in dealing with me, he was always very professional and respectful and was always true to his word. Well, anyway, long story short, they didn't know, the media, if Lawrence was even going to practice during the course of the week. So the PR guy says to me, go get your equipment, your mixer and your recorder and your mics and everything. And before practice, go back into the tight ends room in the locker room and set it up in there. So when Lawrence comes in, you can just grab him, have him go into the tight ends room, and you'll do the spot with him. And this way, he doesn't have to get bothered with anybody else. I said, great. So I go in. The team goes out to practice. And I don't know what's going on out there because I'm inside the tight ends room setting up. All of a sudden, I look out the door, and there's Lawrence. The whole team's already out to practice, and Lawrence is walking over to his locker, and he's got his equipment on. And I'm thinking to myself, he's going to practice, isn't he? He was late. He was with the trainers, but he walks over to his locker, grabs his helmet, turns around, looks at me. And I said, go get him, Superman. He smiles, gives me a wink, points at me, and says, I'll see you later, and runs out to practice. The media was blown away when he got out there, because I later went out there, and they were like, they couldn't believe he was out there practicing. So then, of course, after practice was over, PR called me into the locker room, said, okay, go in the tight ends room, practice is over. And Lawrence came in, and we did the interview, and he was great. And, of course, the Giants did lose that game to Dallas, but they wound up in the wild card game, went out to San Francisco, and they got whacked by the 49ers. But the point of my story is that for all the erratic behavior that Lawrence had in his personal life, if he respected you and you treated him fairly, he was very willing to reciprocate. And when it came time to be responsible to his teammates, they will all tell you they would rather have him in a foxhole on Sunday, injured or not, than any human being on the face of the earth. And I hope that story illustrates those things.
Unreal. Paul, I feel like I've had way more fun in this last 35 minutes than I feel like I should be allowed. So I could listen to you for days.
You're very kind.
I just got one more. Well,
that's all I can say. And people keep asking me, you're going to write a book? I'm like, no. The reason I've had such a long career is because I vowed never to do
that. That's very, very true and very smart. Last one. It's a fun one. I love to close out with. you live in you live in a region that has some of the best food in the world. I I always ask, what is your favorite Mexican food?
Oh, wow. Ah, you know, there's my best friend and his wife have us up for dinner quite often. And I can't specifically tell you exactly what it is, but it is a Mexican food with wraps and grilled beef and cheese. It's not like a typical taco or anything. It's a little different than that. You could probably come up with the name easier than I can. I've never actually asked what it was. I just know that I eat it. It's good.
You know what? Homemade Mexican food is as good as it gets. I tell you, and oh, I would say, I mean, it's got to be some sort of burrito.
It's
So,
some, yeah, it's in the family. I know it's not like the typical burrito you would get like at the restaurant though.
did you say it's shredded? Is the beef
Yes,
shredded? Oh, it's
yes.
got to be. Oh, it's either barbacoa or birria, which
Well,
is
I guess it's one of those.
and it's those are some of the favorite, some of the best. Oh, some of the best food. Oh, yes, yes, and you got to be homemade, so even better, even better. Oh, mi amigo, this was fantastic. This was fantastic. I so enjoyed this. So enjoyed the time. I want to make sure you. It's a training camp is coming up. I want to point out anything that you got coming up, or before training camp, or anything that coming up during training camp that people got to be on the lookout for.
No, I just think that especially fans now with the digital world that we have, it's very easy to go to either Giants.com or WFAN or MSG. We our Giants programming. MSG is our sports channel regional affiliate for Giants programming. So, our stuff is always available there. Giants fans always find a way to find us, trust me, especially when they've got a lot to say.
And they've had a lot to say. Familia, those of you who are listening to us on our audio network, make sure you're following him at Giants WFAN. Like I said, one of the most iconic names in sports radio, sports programming, te lo digo. Fantastic. And familia, eso es todo for our show. I hope you enjoyed this half as much as I did, because then you really, really still enjoyed the hell out of yourself. Please, when you're going one last time, when you're going to fantasypoints.com, make sure you're putting in that promo code familia22 and get 10% off your subscription. Again, I'm going to keep pushing out our content. We're coming down to the tail end of our NFL Insider series, but we still, as you can see, we're still bringing out heavy hitters that are bringing you the inside information from the field. Make sure you're going to familiaffb.com for original content, and I'm going to keep pushing everything out at Jorge Martin 17. And if you go to Facebook and Instagram, Familia FFB. Otra vez, to our invitado, Paul, muchas gracias. As we would say in Spanish, esto fue un gran placer. And everybody, remember, todos somos familia. Salud.